Calligraphy as an art form means probably also that you can stress your boundaries, you can push your boundaries and do whatever you want. But today I want to talk about readability. Because in my opinion, beauty is a matter of harmony, is a matter of balance. And when we cannot read the quotes and it's all written upside down or in typefaces that we cannot decipher anymore, then it might be great art, but I'd like to read it. So there is a functionality to calligraphy. And it doesn't matter what you do, when you have an art form, I think it has to be balanced. The white space have to be balanced with the black. And in drawing we call that negative space. It's the space that you don't have to do anything for. It's the paper. Let me show this to you. It's this. This is the white space. It's the space between the letters, the space between the words, even the space between around this graphic image. That needs to be balanced. Here's an example. When you hear music, there's a pause between notes. And the pause is equally as important as the notes to make the music pleasant, to make it nice to listen to. In calligraphy, the readability to me is important because we want to communicate something in a beautiful way. And white space in drawing is the negative space. It is the pause between the notes. It is where nothing is said. It's the void. It's really where you don't have to do anything, but where being comes into place. I always refer to it as, well, it could be God. It could be what that is not said. There's a void. There's the biggest universe. There's a special tension between the two. Today we're going to look at how we can learn how to balance that. It's not necessarily a science, although we can get close to figuring out how much room does a word need. And for example, again, if you see the white space between this and this, they're almost the same. So the letters are not separated enough to make it readable into a word. And we're going to develop a sensibility for it, or sensitivity for it. And it can grow. You can nurture that and learn to see what feels balanced. So let's go look at the demonstration and make sense of this. It's a super interesting given. I showed you this example before. I have the flat brush. I'm now under an angle of 45 degrees. Since you guys had a little bit trouble in keeping that same angle, I actually am not giving a very good example here. So please forgive me for that. But the best is that the angle is always the same. I'm turning it here because I also think that the downward should be fatter, but it's not. The downward movement is actually a little bit thinner than the curve of the A or the O or the E. You will see that. See, and now I'm turning it a little bit, and I apologize for that. It's now straighter, and I'm turning it here around the corner. Don't do that. Don't do what I do. You will find, though, that eventually, the more consistent you are in all your movements, the nicer all the curves are, and also straight, how it feels more balanced when you follow exactly the same
direction. Here I have a thinner brush. They're really flat brushes. If you practice this enough, you can make it really, really as beautiful as a printed letter. Again, like I said, this is watercolor paper. It has to soak up all the water. And if you want to continue with making art of this, you can use this with different colors and make beautiful compositions with it. The thing is that it has to dry before you can go over it. But even with one color, you can see that you can make it darker or lighter if you dilute it more. Well, what we're talking about today is the white space between the letters, and the white space eventually also between the words. And how do you measure that? Well, one day my teacher told me, if you have marbles, then the amount of marbles that you can put between the two letters in the letter itself, that is how you measure the amount of white space. So now I'm going to mimic the marbles as if I would have a bag of marbles. Of course, they're not all the same, but I'll do the best I can with it. And then I'm going to count them and see how they relate to one another. Between the two letters separately, there should be more marbles than within the letter itself, if that makes sense. Then between the words, there should also be more space between the last and the first letter of the word. And you measure that by having a bag of marbles and then shaking it out and then counting it. Of course, we're not going to do that because that's too much work. And I do it only once here to show you how you could measure it if you want to. This ends up being more space within the letter N than between the A and the N, which is not a good idea. There should be more space between the A and the N. So learn to see, or actually learn to estimate, make an estimate of how much is between each letter and within the letter itself. Let's go do that today. It's a great exercise. And for today, it will be a measurement.